Hey, Spencer, how you doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Oh, very good. Ranting, raving, but that actually makes me happy. People think I'm angry all the time, but I'm actually in my best state while I'm frothing like this.
Yeah, it's good to get the negativity out somehow.
Well, that's right. Jane doesn't have to deal with it as much out of me then.
Smart move.
So, I'm always reading your stories, and then just to
Mhm.
remind everybody, at spencerfernando.com, there's lots of them you're putting out all the time. But just one that caught my eye. It kind of coupled a bit with a column I did in a sense of what the almost apologetic statement from the government on the RCMP's 150th anniversary. And you pointing out how the lack of equipment for Canadian troops, it signifies a deeper decline for Canada as a nation. Like, this is symbolizing much more than just the immediate problem that we're leaving our troops in the lurch.
Yeah, if you tell a whole generation of people that Canada's history is, nothing but evil and colonialism and, terrible mistreating people and, all our values are bad and we should feel guilty and sad about everything, then, you're at the same time you're saying, oh, well, sign up, join the military and, go overseas to, defend our national interest. Well, how can you really have national interest if you take such a negative view of the nation and the history of the country? And so I do see those things as linked. You have a government that manages. I think we just saw that they just asked for the authority to spend $20 billion extra dollars this year over what they'd already budgeted, which itself was a massive increase over the previous year. So they spend money on everything. Massive deficits. The debt's gone up dramatically. The only place where it seems they don't spend much money is equipping our soldiers. They sent people over. I think it was to Latvia, and they're having to buy their own helmets. So, I'm sure we'll get to the moral aspect of, sending people to harm's way without equipping them and how bad that is. But I do think we are seeing a deeper problem with just the fact that we've, demonized our history. We've made people think Canada's, based on bad values. Western civilization it's no better than any other civilization. It's terrible. It's got all these problems. And so when you kind of depress a country like that and depress a whole generation about their past and their history, then how do you expect people to join the military, and how do you expect to have a government that sees the value of the military, or have citizens that see the value of the military? Because it's not just, it's easy to blame the politicians, but most Canadians don't vote on whether the military is effective or not, and most people don't seem to care that much. So I think it's a serious problem, especially in a world that's becoming a lot more dangerous.
Well, it's it. The military is a calling. It's not a route to easy money. It's not a good time. It's some dangerous sometimes and difficult career path to take. The people who join typically are feeling that they're going to do a service for the nation they love. That's what would help them, I guess, overlook shortcomings they're getting back from the military, such as perhaps not being as well equipped or whatnot as they should be. But if they're at the same time being told they should be ashamed of the nation and being under-equipped, this is a terrible formula for these people serving right now.
Yeah, and it's one of the ironies was some of the soldiers, the other NATO troops that were over there, I think from the Netherlands, had better equipment than the Canadians, and much of the equipment was actually Canadian. They've been buying Canadian equipment for some time, so we make good equipment, we just don't buy it for our own soldiers, and we don't equip them. And then there's, of course, the aspect of, Justin Trudeau postures as a, big defender of NATO and the rules-based international order. He talks about it all the time. But, it's just words if you don't back it up, right? So he says all the nice words about, supporting NATO and freedom and democracy and all that stuff. But you send people overseas, into the idea is that if there's a big war, they're going to be involved in it. That's the reason we're sending people over there, is a deterrent. But obviously they'd be on the front line if a massive war broke out. So how can you justify sending them over there if you're not equipping them well, right? You're basically saying, yeah, well, we just hope nothing bad happens, because if it does, you'll be under-equipped and your chances of dying will go up. So again, I don't see how, it's sad that Canadians are not more outraged about this, because we're sending people to harm's way without equipping them. We're spending massive amounts of money every year, but somehow not, prioritizing our national defense. So, I see, all these people who posture as, they're supporters of NATO and oppose Russia. That's fine. But, we live in the real world. And that means if you want to really oppose Russia and stand up for NATO, then you need to equip our military. We need to have a credible military force. We need to be able to, if necessary, fight and succeed in a major war. And so, I think there's a lot of talk in this country about what our values are, supposedly, but we undermine those values both by, of course, demonizing our history. And then we undermine those values by not living up to our military commitments or our commitments to our allies. So, I don't know why people would really take our country seriously at this point.
And this has been going on actually for a long, long time. I remember during one of the Gulf Wars. For one, we had to take a gun out of surplus because they didn't actually have a gun for their boat to serve in the Gulf. And a bunch of our soldiers went overseas, and they showed up in the desert, and they had olive green uniforms. And of course, they stood out like sore thumbs. They didn't have desert camouflage. There's different types. They're not in the jungle. So other soldiers lent them ponchos to cover their olive green uniforms. This was decades ago. And how humiliating that must have been for them, when you're serving overseas in these other countries, that they're lending you these things out of a sense of goodwill and to keep you safe, of course. But if this hasn't been solved after decades of underfunding the military, do you think we ever will turn it around? As you said, Canadians don't seem to get upset enough about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing the best I can to try to wake more people up about it, but it's certainly a tough task. And, one of the strange things about it is, if you look at the country that Canada most resembles, militarily in terms of our attitude towards the military and underfunding, ironically, it's Germany, right? I mean, Germany has the same thing. I mean, they promised recently they were going to boost their military funding, and that turned out to be mostly hot air. They haven't really done that much. But it's so odd because Germany, you can understand why they'd be a little reticent to build up their military again, right? I mean, they've got a history where certainly the idea of saying, we're pretty ashamed of what we did in the past, that makes a lot of sense for Germany. Canada, of course, is fighting on the opposite side of that. So we have a lot to be proud of militarily, but we seem to have the same kind of almost ashamed attitude of, the military. We don't want to really talk about it. We don't want a big military. We don't want to be too strong. It's too scary and too mean. And so, I don't know if it will change. It's an attitude that obviously comes, I think, from, very deep with a lot of Canadians. I see people say, we don't need a military, or America will protect us, or, who needs a big military in today's day and age? And again, a big military is something that certainly looks like a waste of money most of the time, but when you need it, it better be there, because you can't just build it up instantly, right? And so, I think all the people who claim that they, support NATO and claim that Canada, should be a part of defending, our values against, countries like Russia, against countries like China, that's only credible if you support building up the military. There's no magical, way around that. You have to have a strong military to be able to defend yourself and help your allies. So, I think maybe it's because Canada hasn't had any, internal military conflicts for a long time. We didn't fight a major war of independence. That's not how we became a nation. So maybe people just don't appreciate it. But, I think it's something that we don't want to overlook, because it's, you don't want to be in a situation where you're desperately trying to build up a military when your country's being attacked.
I would think it doesn't have to be a large military, but we could at least equip them better. The current military they're using sidearms from World War II. I remember a series of columns on that in the National Post. They've been spending decades navel gazing and talking about getting new sidearms. You could go to Cabela's with $2 million and get them updated sidearms in a week if you really wanted to, and they still can't even manage to get this done. I mean, it seems almost, if it's that bad, that it's purposeful, that they're trying to starve this military out of existence.
Yeah, there certainly does seem to be part of that, that attitude at play here. And as you say, it doesn't need to be a massive military. We're not a big country in terms of population, but certainly we could have a very advanced Air Force. We could be a leader in drone technology, missile technology, and then have a small but very well equipped, military. And even in terms of cost, I mean, it's not really that expensive. I mean, NATO's asking us to spend 2% of GDP on our military. That's not really excessive. I mean, you look at a lot of other countries, they're spending 4, 5, 6%, way more militaries. Even the US, I mean, everyone talks about the US supposedly being some big, imperial military power. They spend, about average, as the world goes on their military per capita, or as a percentage of their GDP. They just have a huge GDP, so it looks like big spending. So we don't need to be, it's not like we're going to be a super militarized country. It's just basically doing the bare minimum. Basically saying, look, we're going to have advanced equipment. We're going to have good planes. We're going to have a few good ships. We're going to have soldiers who are well trained and well equipped. And if we need to help our allies, then we can do so. And so that really shouldn't be too much to ask. I mean, the flip side is, you look at it from the American perspective. By not funding our own military, and then by saying, America will protect us, we're basically saying, Americans will die to protect Canadians because we're not choosing to do our part. And an alliance has to go both ways. If we expect the Americans to help us if we're in trouble, we should be able to at least do a little bit to help them if they get in trouble. And so I think just, strategically, morally, ethically, having a decent military is certainly not something we can overlook in today's world.
Well, we'll keep debating anyways, and keep pushing and shoving and trying to keep a balance in the nation, I would hope. I appreciate your contributions and your columns going out there. Just to kind of remind everybody one more time before I let you go, where can we find where you're writing and where your presence is out there, Spencer?
Yeah, you can go to spencerfernando.com. That's where most of my articles are. And then I publish one column about once a week for the National Citizens Coalition. So you can find that on nationalcitizens.ca.
Great. Well, I appreciate you joining the show again, Spencer. It's always a good conversation. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks.
You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.